The envelope trembled in my hands as I read the words that would change everything. We regret to inform you that your position at Westlake Medical Center has been terminated, effective immediately. 32 years of service, and they couldn't even tell me to my face. Just a formal letter left on my desk Friday afternoon, ensuring I'd find it after everyone else had conveniently left for the weekend. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from and if this story touches. You make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sat in my car in the empty parking lot, staring at the hospital building where I'd spent more than half my life. The sky had darkened, raindrops beginning to patter against the windshield, matching the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. They'd cited budgetary restructuring as the reason for my dismissal. That's corporate speak for, we found someone younger who'll work for less. At 58, I wasn't ready to retire, but apparently Westlake thought otherwise. My phone buzzed. In my purse. James, my son. The very thought of telling him sent a wave of anxiety through my body. He'd been so proud when I'd been promoted to head nurse 7 years ago. What would he think now? Mom, where are you? Dinner starts in 20 minutes. Alicia's. Parents are already here. I'd completely forgotten about the dinner party at his house. His wife Alicia had been planning it for weeks, a chance to impress her parents with their perfect life in their perfect home. I'm on my way, James. Just finishing up at work. The lie slipped out so easily. Well, hurry up. You know how important. This is to Alicia. The drive to his suburban home felt like an out-of-body experience. I parked behind a sleek black Mercedes that must belong to Alicia's father, Lawrence Bennett, the renowned surgeon. Next to it was a gleaming white Range Rover, Diana, Bennett's vehicle of choice. The Bennetts had never been shy about flaunting their wealth, and they'd never quite approved of their daughter marrying the son of a mere nurse. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, quickly wiping away any evidence of tears, and forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. You can do this, Eleanor, I whispered to myself. It's just one evening. The front door swung open before I could even ring the bell. James stood there, his expression a mixture of relief and irritation. Finally. Everyone's waiting, he hissed, ushering me inside. The house was immaculate as always, Alicia's doing. My son had married into money and had quickly developed a taste for it. The living room was a showcase of expensive furniture and artwork, none of which James could have afforded on his teacher's salary. But his in-laws had been generous with wedding gifts and down payments. Eleanor, we were beginning to think you weren't coming. Diana Bennett air-kissed both my cheeks, her diamond, earrings catching the light. At 63, she looked 50 thanks to the skilled hands of the best plastic surgeons in the city. Lawrence Bennett offered a curt nod from his position near the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand. Working late again? The hospital must really run you ragged. I swallowed hard, the termination letter feeling like it was burning a hole in my purse. You know how it is, I replied vaguely. Alicia emerged from the kitchen, her pregnant belly leading the way. 7 months along with my first grandchild. She was beautiful in her maternity dress, but her smile tightened slightly upon seeing me. Eleanor, you're here. We can finally eat. She glanced at my simple blouse and slacks with barely concealed disapproval. I hadn't had time to change into anything more suitable for their dinner party. Throughout the meal, I pushed food around my plate. My appetite vanished. The conversation flowed around me, Lawrence discussing his latest surgical innovation, Diana talking about her women's charity foundation, James sharing anecdotes from his high school English classes, and Alicia detailing her plans for the nursery. We've hired the most amazing designer, she gushed. He's done nurseries for celebrities. It's going to cost a fortune, but Daddy thinks it's worth it for his first grandchild. Lawrence nodded indulgently. Nothing but the best for my daughter and grandson. We find out next week if it's a boy or girl, James corrected. But we're thinking it's a boy. Diana turned to me suddenly. Eleanor, you've been awfully quiet tonight. Everything all right at the hospital? 5 faces turned to me expectantly. I opened my mouth, not knowing what would come out. Actually, Mom's probably just tired, James interrupted. Those double shifts must be exhausting. But hey, at least the overtime pay is good, right? The way he said it made something twist inside me. The casual assumption that my primary value was as an income source. Had it always been that way? Actually, I started again, setting down my fork. I lost my job today. The silence that followed was deafening. Lawrence's eyebrows shot up. Diana's hand froze midway to her wine glass. Alicia's mouth formed a perfect O of shock. And James, my son's face darkened like a thundercloud. "What do you mean you lost your job?" he asked slowly. I pulled the letter from my purse and placed it on the table. Budget cuts, 32 years, and they let me go with a form letter. "But that's your entire income," James said, as though I might not have realized this fact. "I'm aware," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll start looking for something else on Monday." Lawrence cleared his throat uncomfortably. "At your age, Eleanor, the medical field isn't exactly known for embracing older workers." "I'm 58, not 80, I shot back, irritation flaring. Diana reached across the table to pat my hand condescendingly. "Of course not, dear. But you have to admit, it might be challenging to start over now." Alicia turned to James, alarm in her eyes. "What about the nursery and the college fund we were hoping she'd contribute to?" "The college fund? For a child not yet born." They'd been counting on my contributions to that too. James stood abruptly. "Mom, can I speak with you in the kitchen?" I followed him, feeling like a chastised child. Once the swinging door closed behind us, he rounded on me. "How could you let this happen?" he demanded, voice low but intense. "Let this happen?" I repeated incredulously. "You think I wanted to lose my job? Did you even try to fight it? Did you speak to HR, your union rep?" "It was a corporate decision, James. The entire department was restructured." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the kitchen. "This is the worst possible timing. The baby's coming. We're expanding the house. And now you drop this bomb at dinner with Alicia's parents?" I stared at my son, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time in years. When had he become this person? This man who cared more about appearances than his own mother's well-being. "I'm sorry my unemployment is such an inconvenience for you," I said quietly. James sighed heavily. "That's not what I meant. It's just, we were counting on your help, Mom. You promised to chip in for the nursery, and now I can't." I finished for him. "At least not right away. I have some savings, but I need to be careful until I find another position." His expression changed then, a calculation happening behind his eyes that made my stomach clench. "How much savings, exactly?" "Enough to get by for a little while," I hedged. I wasn't about to lay out my financial situation for him to dissect. "Because, you could move in with us temporarily," he offered, though his tone lacked any warmth or sincerity. "Just until you get back on your feet. You could help with the baby when it comes." Ah, there it was. Not concern for my welfare, but seeing an opportunity. Free childcare in exchange for room and board. "That's generous of you, James, but I'll be fine in my apartment. Your lease is up next month, isn't it?" He'd clearly been thinking about this. "It makes no sense to renew it if you don't have income. Move in with us, save on rent, and help with the baby. It's the logical solution." Before I could respond, the kitchen door swung open, and Alicia entered with Diana close behind. "Is everything okay?" Alicia asked, though her eyes were fixed on James rather than me. "Mom's lease is ending soon," James said quickly. "I was just suggesting she move in with us for a while. It would help everyone." Diana's eyes lit up. "What a wonderful idea! Eleanor could be our live-in nanny. Most of my friends have them and they're absurdly expensive. I haven't agreed to anything, I interjected, but they weren't listening. She could take the guest room downstairs, Alicia was saying to James. We'd need to move some things around, but it could work. And think of the money you'd save, Diana added, both on rent and childcare. Lawrence joined us in the kitchen, apparently having overheard. Seems like a sensible arrangement. Eleanor gets housing. You get help with the baby. A fair exchange of services. As if I were being interviewed for a position rather than discussing moving in with my own son. We should discuss this another time, I suggested, discomfort growing by the second. No, let's settle it now, James insisted. The timing is perfect. Your lease ends, you move in with us, and you'll be here when the baby arrives. You said yourself you have some savings. That can cover your personal expenses while you look for work. I looked at the four of them, all staring at me expectantly, already mentally rearranging their lives to accommodate me, or rather, to accommodate what I could do for them. And I realized with startling clarity that not one of them had asked how I was feeling about losing my job. Not one had offered sympathy or support. Their only concern was how my situation would impact them. I need to think about it, I said finally. James frowned. What's there to think about? It's the obvious solution. Nevertheless, I'd like some time, I insisted, firmer now. An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Alicia exchanged a look with her mother, and James's jaw tightened in the way it always did when he was frustrated. Fine, he conceded, but your lease is up in 3 weeks, so don't think too long. We returned to the dining room, where James smoothly explained to Alicia's younger brother and his wife, who had been left at the table, that we'd been discussing some family logistics. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur, with conversation carefully steered away from my employment situation. As I prepared to leave, Diana embraced me with false warmth. Everything happens for a reason, Eleanor. Perhaps this is the universe, telling you it's time to focus on family. I nodded politely, not trusting myself to speak. James walked me to my car, hovering as I unlocked it. Think about our offer, Mom. It really is the best solution for everyone. I'll let you know, I promised, sliding into the driver's seat. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. James was already heading back inside, not waiting to see if I made it safely to the street. When had my son stopped caring about me as a person? When had I become merely a resource to him? The truth was, I did have savings. More than James or anyone else knew. Much more. But that wasn't something I was ready to reveal, especially not after tonight's display of shallow concern and calculation. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sank onto the couch, finally allowing myself the luxury of tears. 32 years at Westlake, gone in an instant. But as I sat there in the dark, something else began to replace the sadness. A slow burning anger, and underneath that, a strange sense of liberation. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet, pushing aside hanging clothes to reveal a small safe embedded in the wall. My fingers moved automatically over the combination lock, James's birthday. Inside was a manila envelope that I hadn't opened in nearly 5 years. I carried it to the kitchen table and carefully extracted the contents. Bank statements, investment portfolio summaries, property deeds. The evidence of a secret I'd kept for over a decade. The papers confirmed what I already knew. I was worth just over $11 million. It had started 15 years ago when Martin Reynolds, a patient I'd cared for during his battle with pancreatic cancer, had included me in his will. Martin had been wealthy but alone, no family, no close friends. During the months I nursed him through his final days, we'd developed a bond that went beyond caregiver and patient. I'd read to him, brought him homemade soup when hospital food became intolerable, and most importantly, listened to his stories, tales of his adventures as a young man, his business successes, and his regrets about never starting a family. When he died, I was shocked to discover he'd left me a substantial inheritance, $2 million. I'd tried to refuse it, feeling it was inappropriate, but his lawyer insisted Martin had been of sound mind and had made his wishes clear. At first, I'd kept the money untouched, uncertain what to do with such a windfall. Then, on the lawyer's advice, I'd consulted a financial advisor who had helped me invest wisely. Over the years, those investments had grown significantly. I'd also purchased several rental properties that provided steady additional income. But I'd never told anyone. Not my coworkers, not my friends, and certainly not James. I'd continued living modestly, working my nursing job, staying in my comfortable but unassuming apartment. The inheritance didn't feel like it belonged to me somehow. It felt like it was meant for something important, though I wasn't sure what yet. James had been in college when I received the inheritance. I'd considered using it to pay his tuition, but he'd already secured scholarships and loans. By the time he graduated and married Alicia, he'd become increasingly distant, absorbed into her wealthy family's lifestyle. The gap between us had widened gradually but steadily. I'd kept my wealth secret partly out of a desire for privacy, partly from a fear that it would change how people saw me, and partly because I was waiting for the right moment, perhaps retirement, to put it to good use. But now, staring at the evidence of my hidden fortune, I wondered if that moment had arrived sooner than expected. The question was, what would I do now? Move in with James and Alicia as they suggested, and become their unpaid nanny while sitting on millions? Or reveal my financial situation and watch their attitudes transform instantly from calculating to fawning? Neither option appealed to me. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Have you thought about our offer? Need to know soon so we can prepare the room." Not even 24 hours, and he was already pressuring me for an answer. I set the phone aside without responding and returned to my financial records. Among the papers was information about a luxury condominium development downtown that I'd invested in 3 years ago. Construction had recently been completed, and as an early investor, I had first rights to purchase one of the units at a preferred rate. I'd been considering it as a potential retirement location someday, but perhaps someday had just arrived. Pulled out my laptop and looked up the development, the Riverside Towers. The images showed gleaming glass and steel structures overlooking the river, with amenities including a rooftop garden, indoor pool, fitness center, and 24-hour concierge service. The available 3-bedroom unit on the 18th floor offered panoramic views of the city and river. It was beautiful. It was available. And it was entirely within my means. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the sales office, leaving a message expressing my interest in viewing the property as soon as possible. Then I drafted a polite but firm text to James. "I appreciate your offer, but I've decided to make other arrangements for my living situation. I'll let you know my plans once they're finalized." His response came almost immediately. "What other arrangements? You don't have a job." I didn't dignify that with a response. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and returned to the couch, financial documents spread before me, planning my next steps with a clarity and purpose I hadn't felt in years. The call from the real estate agent came the following morning. She could show me the condominium at noon. Perfect. As I dressed in one of my nicer outfits, a navy blue pantsuit I usually reserved for important meetings at the hospital, my phone rang again. "James. Mom. What's going on? What other arrangements are you talking about?" I took a deep breath. "I'm exploring my options, James. That's all." "What options? You were just laid off." "Unless..." His voice took on an accusatory tone. "Have you been hiding something from me? Do you have money I don't know about?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "My finances are my business, James." "So that's a yes," he pressed. "All these years you've been holding out on us while we struggled. Do you know how hard it's been for us to keep up with the Bennetts? The pressure Alicia feels from her family? And all along, you could have helped. His words struck me like physical blows. The entitlement, the assumption that any money I had should automatically flow to him. It was breathtaking in its selfishness. James, I worked hard for 32 years. If I've managed to save something for myself, that's my prerogative. But we're family, he exclaimed, as if that single word entitled him to everything I had. Families help each other. We offered you a place to live in exchange for free childcare, I reminded him quietly. So what? That's how families work. Everyone contributes. I closed my eyes, trying to maintain my composure. James, I need to go. We can talk about this later. No, we need to talk now. How much money do you have, Mom? And why have you been keeping it from us? Goodbye, James, I said firmly, and ended the call. He called back immediately. I let it go to voicemail, then again, and again. Eventually, I silenced my phone entirely. The Riverside Towers was even more impressive in person than in photos. The lobby featured marble floors, a cascading water feature, and elegant seating areas where residents could socialize or wait for guests. The concierge greeted me warmly, and the sales agent, Vanessa, exuded professional enthusiasm as she escorted me to the private elevator that would take us to the 18th floor. The Riverview Suite is one of our premium offerings, she explained as we ascended. 3 bedrooms, 3 baths, a chef's kitchen, and of course, the views are simply unparalleled. The elevator doors opened directly into the foyer of the condominium, and I had to suppress a gasp. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the river and city skyline. The open-concept living area flowed seamlessly into a dining space and gourmet kitchen with gleaming quartz countertops. Hardwood floors, custom cabinetry, high ceilings. It was a far cry from my modest apartment, or even James and Alicia's suburban home. The master suite is this way. Vanessa guided me through the unit. Note the walk-in closet and the ensuite bathroom with soaking tub and separate shower. I followed in a daze, trying to imagine myself living in such luxury. Could I? Should I? For so long, I'd lived modestly despite my wealth, partly out of habit and partly from some vague sense that extravagance wasn't meant for someone like me. But why not? Why shouldn't I enjoy the fruits of my investments and good fortune? What's the asking price? I inquired, trying to sound casual. Vanessa named a figure that would have made me faint a decade ago, but now represented less than a fifth of my net worth. As an early investor, you're eligible for our preferred pricing, she added, and we have several financing options available. I won't need financing, I heard myself say. I can pay in cash. Vanessa's professional smile widened slightly. Excellent. That would certainly expedite the process. How soon were you looking to move in? As soon as possible, I replied. My current lease is ending soon. We could probably close within 2 weeks if you're interested. The unit is move-in ready. I walked back to the main living area, standing before the massive windows and looking out at the city I'd lived in my entire life, but had never seen from this vantage point. I'll take it, I decided. By the time I returned to my apartment, the paperwork was underway. I'd placed a substantial deposit and set the closing for exactly 2 weeks from today. I felt lightheaded with the enormity of my decision, but also exhilarated. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I'd made a major choice based solely on what I wanted, not on what was practical or what others expected of me. My silenced phone showed 17 missed calls from James and a flurry of increasingly angry texts. Why aren't you answering? We need to talk about this. I can't believe you've been keeping secrets. Alicia is upset. Thanks a lot. If you have money, you have a responsibility to help with your grandchild's future. Call me back. I set the phone aside again, unwilling to let his demands intrude on my moment of transformation. Instead, I began making plans. I'd need to give notice on my apartment, arrange for movers, decide what furniture to keep and what to replace. The condo came with an option for custom furnishings, which I'd declined, preferring to select my own pieces. I spent the evening browsing online furniture stores, creating a vision for my new home that reflected my personal taste rather than what was merely functional or affordable. As midnight approached, I finally picked up my phone, bracing myself, and called James. He answered on the first ring. "Finally. Where have you been all day? We've been worried sick." "I had appointments," I said simply. "Appointments? What appointments could be so important that you ignore your son's calls?" I took a deep breath. "James, I've found a new place to live. I'll be moving in 2 weeks when my lease ends." "What? Where? How can you afford—" "I have the means," I interrupted. "That's all you need to know right now." "No, that's not all I need to know." His voice rose sharply. "You've obviously been hiding money from us for who knows how long, and now you're making major decisions without even consulting me?" "I wasn't aware I needed your permission to make decisions about my own life," I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "It's not about permission. It's about family. We made a plan that would help everyone, and now you're just—" "The plan helped you, James. It turned me into your live-in nanny. That's not fair. We were offering you a place to stay when you lost your job." "In exchange for childcare services," I reminded him again. "You never once asked how I felt about losing my job. You never offered sympathy or support. Your only concern was how my situation would impact you." There was a pause. Then James's voice returned, softer but still tense. "That's not true. We care about you, Mom, but we also have to think practically. The baby's coming, and we need help. Then hire help, like any other couple would do. I'm your mother, not your employee. So you'd rather spend money on some fancy new place than help your own family?" The accusation hung in the air between us. "James, I worked hard my entire life, including raising you on my own after your father left. I'm entitled to make choices. For myself now. But what about us? What about your grandchild?" "I will always be there for my grandchild," I assured him. "But on my terms, not as unpaid help." Another pause, longer this time. When James spoke again, his voice had hardened. "I think we need to have this conversation in person. I'm coming. Over tomorrow after work." "Fine," I agreed. "But my decision is made." The rest of the night was restless, filled with swirling thoughts and emotions. Had I done the right thing? Was I being selfish? But each time doubt crept in, I remembered the calculating looks at the dinner table, the immediate pivot from shock to how they could benefit from my situation, and my resolve strengthened. The next day dawned bright and clear. I spent the morning contacting moving companies for quotes and beginning the process of sorting through my belongings. What would I take to my new life? What would I leave behind? By the time James arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, I had achieved a strange sense of calm. I knew what was coming, and I was prepared. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "All right, let's cut to the chase," he said as soon as I closed the door behind him. "How much money do you have, and how long have you been hiding it? From us?" I gestured for him to sit down. "Would you like something to drink first?" "I don't want a drink, Mom. I want answers." I settled into my favorite armchair, facing him across the coffee table. "My financial situation is private, James. It always has been." "Not when it affects this family? It isn't. We've been struggling to meet Alicia's parents' expectations, trying to give our child the kind of start in life they had, and all this time you've been—" "What? Hoarding money?" The accusation stung. "I haven't been hoarding anything. I've been living within my means and making responsible decisions." "But you have money," he pressed. Enough to get a new place right away without even looking for another job first. I nodded slowly. Yes, I have savings. How much? That's not your concern. James leaped up from the couch, pacing in frustration. Of course it's my concern. I'm your son. If you have resources, they should be benefiting this family, my family. And there it was. The heart of the matter laid bare with breathtaking clarity. In James's view, anything I had automatically belonged to him by extension. My lifetime of work, my careful investments, even an inheritance left to me specifically, all of it should flow to him and his new family, without question. James, I said quietly, sit down, please. Something in my tone must have reached him because he reluctantly returned to the couch. I'm going to say something that may be difficult for you to hear, I continued. But it needs to be said. You are not entitled to my money. Not the money I earned through decades of work. Not any investments I've made. Not any gifts or inheritances I've received. None of it. His face flushed with anger. So you admit it. You have been keeping secrets. From us. I've maintained privacy about my finances, yes, and given your reaction right now, I was right to do so. How can you say that? We're family. Yes, we are. And I love you. I always will. But being family doesn't mean I'm obligated to fund your lifestyle or subsidize your choices. This isn't about lifestyle, he exploded. This is about my child, your grandchild. Don't you want what's best for them? Of course I do, I replied evenly. And I'll be there for my grandchild in many ways. But your expectation that I should simply hand over my resources or provide free childcare on your terms is unreasonable. James stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Who are you? He whispered. My mother would never talk like this. My mother would do anything to help her family. The words cut deep, but I held firm. I am your mother. I'm also a woman who has worked hard her entire life and deserves to make her own choices. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. He stood again, shaking his head in disbelief. I can't believe this. Wait until I tell Alicia and her parents. They were right about you all along. I raised an eyebrow. Right about what, exactly? That you're... He hesitated, then plunged ahead. Selfish, cold. That you didn't understand our world or what it takes to belong in it. Each word was like a knife, but I refused to show how deeply they wounded me. If that's what they think of me, what you think of me, then perhaps it's best we take some time apart. Fine, he snapped, grabbing his jacket. But don't come crying to us when you realize how lonely your money is. When you're old and sick and need someone to care for you, remember this moment, when you chose your precious savings over your own family. He stormed to the door, then turned back, his expression cruel in a way I'd never seen before. And don't expect to be welcome in our home or our child's life until you make this right. The door slammed behind him with such force that the framed photos on my wall rattled. One fell to the floor, the glass shattering. A picture of James. At his college graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling broadly at the camera. I stared at the broken frame for a long moment, then carefully picked it up, mindful of the glass shards. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Something irreparable had just happened between my son and me. A line had been crossed that we might never walk back from. Yet amid the pain and grief, I felt something else stirring, a quiet determination. I would not be manipulated, not even by my own child. I would not apologize for having resources or for choosing to use them as I saw fit. I would not surrender my autonomy or self-respect, even for love. As I swept up the broken glass, I made a decision. I would move forward with my plans. I would create the life I wanted, on my terms. And if James couldn't accept that, couldn't see me as a person deserving of respect and autonomy rather than just a resource to be tapped, then perhaps the distance between us was necessary, painful, but necessary. I sat amid the remnants of the shattered frame and allowed myself, finally, to cry. Not just for the argument with James, but for all of it. The job loss, the years of modest living despite my wealth, the gradual erosion of my relationship with my son as he'd been absorbed into Alicia's world of privilege and expectation. But, as the tears subsided, a strange sense of peace settled over me. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I was making choices solely for myself. Not as a nurse, not as a mother, not as anyone's support system or safety net, just as Eleanor Walsh, a woman ready to claim her own life at last. I picked up my phone and dialed Vanessa, the real estate agent. "Is there any way we can expedite the closing? I'd like to move in as soon as possible. Tomorrow, I would begin shopping for furniture for my new home. I would hire a decorator to help create the space I'd always dreamed of, but never allowed myself to have. I would register for art classes at the community center, something I'd wanted to do for years but never found the time for. And I would prepare myself for the possibility that my son might not be part of this new chapter in my life. Not until he could see me as more than a means to an end, more than a resource to be exploited. It would hurt, perhaps more than anything had ever hurt before, but I would survive it. I had survived worse." As I drifted off to sleep that night, an unexpected thought floated through my mind. Perhaps losing my job hadn't been a tragedy after all. Perhaps it had been the push I needed to step into the life I deserved, a life that had been waiting for me all along, if only I'd had the courage to claim it. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and an unfamiliar sense of lightness. Despite the painful confrontation with James, I felt oddly liberated. For 32 years, I'd defined myself by my career as a nurse. Before that, I'd been defined by my role as a single mother. For the first time in my adult life, I was free to define myself. I made coffee and opened my laptop, beginning to research interior designers in the area. If I was going to create my dream home, I wanted to do it properly. I was scrolling through portfolios when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Eleanor Walsh?" A woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Yes, it is." "This is Miranda Bennett, Lawrence's sister, Alicia's aunt." My stomach tightened. I'd met Miranda only a handful of times at family gatherings. She was cut from the same cloth as the rest of the Bennetts, wealthy, polished, and judgmental. "James called Lawrence last night, quite upset," she continued without pleasantries. "The family is concerned about the situation." "What situation would that be?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Don't be coy, Eleanor. You know exactly what I'm talking about. James told us you've been concealing substantial assets while letting them struggle to maintain appearances in our circle." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Struggle? With their combined incomes and the generous support from Lawrence and Diana? "Their lifestyle has certain requirements," Miranda replied stiffly. "Lawrence has been very generous, but he shouldn't have to shoulder the entire burden when you clearly have means of your own." "I wasn't aware that I was obligated to report my financial status to the Bennett family," I said. "We're all family now, Eleanor. There shouldn't be secrets between us, especially not when they affect Alicia and the baby. My finances don't affect Alicia or the baby." "Of course they do." Miranda's voice rose slightly. "Every resource in a family should be directed toward giving the next generation the best possible advantages. Surely you understand that." I took a deep breath. "Miranda, I appreciate your concern, but my financial decisions are my own." "This isn't just about money," she pressed. "It's about trust. James and Alicia feel betrayed, and rightfully so. The entire family is upset." "The entire family?" I echoed. "You mean the Bennett family?" "We're all one family now," she insisted. And yet, I wasn't consulted when Alicia and James decided I should move in and provide free childcare. I wasn't included in discussions about my grandchild's future. I was simply assigned a role. Miranda made a dismissive sound. Don't be dramatic. They were offering you a place to stay when you lost your job. Most mothers would be grateful. Most mothers wouldn't be treated as hired help by their own children. Well, Miranda's tone chilled. Several degrees. I can see we're not going to have a productive conversation. I'll tell Lawrence and Diana that I tried. But I should warn you, Eleanor, the Bennetts have significant influence in this city. If you're planning to look for another nursing position, it would be unfortunate if doors were closed to you. The threat hung in the air, bold and unmistakable. Are you threatening me, Miranda? Of course not, she backpedaled smoothly. I'm simply pointing out that family support works both ways. We help those who help us. Thank you for the clarification, I replied, my tone as icy as hers. Is there anything else? Just think about what you're doing, Eleanor. Is your pride worth losing your family over? Before I could respond, she hung up. I sat motionless, coffee cooling in my mug, stunned by the conversation. The Bennetts were mobilizing against me, treating my financial autonomy as a betrayal of the family. And they were threatening my career prospects. Not that I needed another nursing job with my current resources, but they didn't know the full extent of my wealth. My phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. Good news! We can expedite closing to next Friday if you're available to sign paperwork tomorrow. I texted back immediately. Perfect. What time tomorrow? 9 days. In 9 days, I could leave this apartment and all its memories behind. I could start fresh in my new home, create the life I wanted. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. I spent the rest of the morning researching moving companies and creating an inventory of what I would take to my new home and what I would replace. By noon, I'd scheduled 3 estimates for the following day and had compiled a detailed list of furniture I wanted to purchase. The doorbell rang just as I was making lunch. Through the peephole, I was surprised to see Diana Bennett standing in my hallway, looking uncomfortable and out of place in her designer outfit and pearl necklace. I opened the door cautiously. Diana, this is unexpected. She gave a tight smile. May I come in? I think we should talk. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her enter. She surveyed my modest apartment with poorly disguised judgment, her gaze lingering on the mismatched furniture and the worn spots in the carpet. Would you like some tea? I offered, more from ingrained politeness than genuine hospitality. No, thank you. I won't stay long. She perched on the edge of my couch as if afraid it might soil her expensive slacks. I wanted to speak with you directly, woman to woman, mother to mother. I sat across from her in my armchair, waiting. Eleanor, I understand you've had a shock losing your job, she began, her voice carefully modulated to project sympathy. And perhaps we, the family, could have been more sensitive to that. Perhaps, I agreed neutrally. But James tells me you're planning to purchase some expensive new home rather than helping with your grandchild. Is that true? I'm moving when my lease ends, I confirmed. I've found a place that suits my needs. And you can afford this on your savings? The skepticism in her voice was unmistakable. Yes, I can. Diana leaned forward, her expression earnest. Eleanor, we've never been close, and perhaps that's partly my fault. But we both want what's best for our children and grandchildren, don't we? Of course. Then you must see that this behavior, hiding assets, refusing to help, moving away just when they need you most, it's not what a good mother does. I felt heat rising to my face. A good mother? Like you, Diana? Teaching your daughter that her worth comes from her proximity to wealth? That family members are valued only for what resources they bring to the table? Diana's eyes widened in shock. How dare you? I've given Alicia every advantage. Yes, and apparently taught her that she's entitled to everyone else's resources as well. That is not— Diana stopped, visibly composing herself. I didn't come here to argue. I came to reason with you, mother to mother. There's nothing to reason about. I'm making choices for my life, as is my right. But your choices affect others. Alicia is distraught. The stress isn't good for the baby. Alicia is upset because she can't access money she didn't know existed. Until 2 days ago, I pointed out. That's not stress. That's entitlement. Diana stood abruptly. I can see this was a waste of time. I had hoped we could resolve this privately, but clearly, you're determined to be difficult. Is that what standing up for myself is called in your world? Being difficult? She brushed imaginary lint from her slacks. Lawrence was right about you from the beginning. You never belonged in our family circle. I only hope James comes to his senses and realizes the mistake he made. The word stung, but I refused to show it. Is that a threat to encourage my son to cut ties with me? It's an observation, Diana replied coldly. Family loyalty clearly means nothing to you. Why should it mean anything to him? After she left, I sat in stunned silence, replaying her words. The Bennetts were positioning me as the villain, the selfish mother who abandoned her family in their time of need. They were twisting reality, recasting my financial independence as a betrayal, my desire for autonomy as selfishness, and they were working to turn James against me. Though, from our last conversation, it seemed they'd already succeeded. My phone rang again, Alicia this time. I let it go to voicemail, not trusting myself to have a calm conversation. Her message was tearful, accusing. How could you do this to us? To your own grandchild? I thought you cared about our family. I turned off my phone, needing space from the emotional manipulation. Then I grabbed my purse and car keys, suddenly desperate to get out of the apartment, away from the encroaching sense that I was being besieged from all sides. I drove without a clear destination, eventually finding myself at River Park, a peaceful green space along the waterfront. I walked along the path, watching families with young children, elderly couples on benches, joggers and dog walkers enjoying the spring afternoon. Would I be part of my grandchild's life? Would James follow through on his threat to keep the baby away from me unless I capitulated to their demands? The thought sent a spike of pain through my heart. I wanted to know my grandchild, to be the kind of loving, supportive grandmother I'd never had myself. But at what cost? Complete surrender of my autonomy? Endless financial support with no boundaries? Relegation to the role of unpaid household? Help? I sat on a bench overlooking the river, the same river my new condominium would look out upon. A family passed by, mother, father, and a toddler taking wobbly steps between them, each parent holding one tiny hand. The scene blurred as tears filled my eyes. Rough day? I turned to find an older gentleman had settled at the other end of my bench. He was perhaps in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'm sorry, I said, hastily wiping my eyes. I didn't mean to disturb you. You didn't, he assured me. But you looked like you could use a friendly ear. Sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger. Under normal circumstances, I would have politely declined and moved on. But there was something comforting about his presence, and I found myself unexpectedly relieved at the prospect of an objective listener. My son is angry with me, I said simply. The man nodded thoughtfully. Children can break our hearts in ways no one else can. They know exactly where to aim. Yes, I agreed, surprised by his insight. They do. May I ask what happened? Only if you want to share, of course. I hesitated, then gave him the condensed version, losing my job, the family's reaction, the discovery of my financial resources, and the subsequent fallout. So now I'm the villain, I concluded. The selfish mother who won't hand over her savings or provide free childcare. Are you close with your son normally? He asked. I considered the question honestly. We used to be. When he was growing up, it was just the two of us. But since he married into the Bennett family, he's changed. Or maybe I just didn't see this side of him before. Money has a way of revealing people's true colors, the man observed, both having it and wanting it. I'm learning that, I agreed ruefully. For what it's worth, he said after a moment, I don't think you're being selfish at all. You worked hard your whole life. You raised your son alone. Now you're entitled to make choices for yourself. That's what I keep telling myself. But then I think about my grandchild, and I wonder if I'm making a terrible mistake. The man smiled, gently. Can I offer some perspective from someone who's been around a bit longer? I nodded. If you give in now, if you surrender your autonomy and your resources because they're pressuring you, you'll establish a pattern that will never end. They'll always want more, and they'll always use emotional manipulation to get it. And your grandchild will grow up seeing that dynamic, learning that it's acceptable to treat you that way. His words resonated deeply. So what should I do? Set boundaries now. Live your life on your terms. Be ready to welcome your grandchild with open arms, but not at the cost of your dignity or independence. The right people, the ones who truly love you, will adjust to your boundaries. The others. He shrugged. Well, perhaps it's better to know who they are now. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes. Then he stood, offering his hand. I'm Robert, by the way. Eleanor, I replied, shaking his hand. Thank you for listening. It helped more than you know. It was my pleasure. I come here most afternoons when the weather's nice. Same bench usually, if you ever need an ear again. As he walked away, I felt a renewed sense of clarity. Robert was right. Giving in now would set a pattern for the future, one that would gradually erode my self-respect and reinforce my son's sense of entitlement. I turned my phone back on to find 3 more missed calls from James, 2 from Alicia, and 1 from Lawrence Bennett himself. There were also several text messages ranging from guilt-inducing, "How can you do this to your family?" to vaguely threatening, "Lawrence says if you're determined to be difficult, he can be difficult too." Instead of responding to any of them, I called Vanessa. I'd like to add furniture selection services to our agreement, I said when she answered, and I'm interested in meeting with a decorator as soon as possible. Of course, she replied enthusiastically. I can set up a meeting with our design team tomorrow after the paperwork signing if that works for you. Perfect. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. I signed the paperwork for the condominium, met with the design team to select furniture and finishings arranged for movers, and began the process of sorting through 3 decades of possessions. The Bennetts continued their campaign of emotional warfare. James and Alicia oscillated between angry accusations and tearful pleas. Lawrence made veiled threats about his influence in the medical community. Diana sent increasingly dramatic texts about Alicia's pregnancy stress and how I would be responsible if anything happened to the baby. I didn't respond to any of it, focusing instead on my move and my future. Each box I packed felt like shedding a layer of my old life. Each decision about my new home, from the color scheme to the artwork to the kitchen appliances, felt like an affirmation of my right to prioritize my own happiness. 6 days before my move, I returned from a meeting with the design team to find James sitting on the steps outside my apartment building. He looked tired, his normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "We need to talk," he said as I approached. I unlocked the building door without responding, and he followed me upstairs to my apartment. Inside, he surveyed the stacks of boxes and bare walls with a frown. "So you're really going through with this?" he observed. "Yes, I am." He paced the small living room, hands shoved in his pockets. "Mom, this has gone too far. The whole family is upset. Alicia cries every night. Her parents are furious. It's affecting everyone." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, keeping my voice level. but my decision stands. What decision exactly? To abandon your family? To hoard your money while your grandchild suffers? My grandchild isn't suffering, James. Your child hasn't even been born yet. But they will suffer. Without the advantages we're trying to provide. The advantages you expect me to fund, I corrected gently. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Why are you being like this? This isn't you. You've always put family first. I'm still putting family first, James. But that doesn't mean sacrificing my independence or surrendering my resources. So what are you saying? You won't help us at all? I sighed, weariness settling into my bones. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I won't be manipulated or coerced. I won't move in and provide free childcare. I won't hand over my savings. Because you and the Bennetts feel entitled to them. Then what will you do? I'll be a grandmother on my terms. I'll love my grandchild and support them in ways that respect my boundaries and your role as parents. James stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head slowly. That's not enough, Mom. Not for us. Not for the Bennetts. I'm sorry to hear that, I said again, my heart breaking even as my resolve strengthened. Because it's all I'm offering. Then I guess there's nothing more to say. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. Lawrence says to remind you that if this continues, he'll make sure you never work in healthcare in this city again. The threat landed like a physical blow, not because I needed a job, I didn't, but because it revealed the depths to which they were willing to sink to control me. You can tell Lawrence, I said, my voice steady despite the anger churning inside me, that threats only reinforce my decision. And you can tell him that if he attempts to interfere with my career, I'll consult a lawyer about harassment. James's eyes widened in shock. You'd sue Alicia's father? Your grandchild's grandfather? I'd protect myself from bullying and intimidation, I corrected, just as I'm doing now. For a brief moment, something flickered in James's eyes. Perhaps a glimmer of recognition, or even respect. Then it vanished, replaced by cold determination. Have it your way, he said flatly. But don't expect to be welcome in our lives until you come to your senses. After he left, I sat among my boxes, surrounded by the remnants of my old life and the promise of the new one to come. The pain of James's ultimatum was raw and visceral, but beneath it was a steadfast certainty that I was doing the right thing, not just for my future, but for his as well, though he couldn't see it yet. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Hello, Martha. It's Eleanor Walsh. I was wondering if that offer to go to Europe together is still open. Martha had been my closest friend at the hospital until she'd retired 3 years ago. She'd been planning a European vacation for months and had invited me along, but I'd declined, citing work obligations and financial constraints. It was time to change that narrative. Eleanor? Of course it's still open. I'm leaving in 3 weeks. Can you actually join me this time? I looked around at my half-packed apartment, at the life I was systematically dismantling to build something new. Yes, I said, a smile spreading across my face despite the tears still drying on my cheeks. Yes, I can. Moving day arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine dappling through new leaves, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. The moving company I'd hired was prompt and efficient, carefully loading my curated possessions into their truck. I'd decided to bring only items that held genuine sentimental value, or still brought me joy. My mother's antique writing desk, the reading chair I'd nursed James in as a baby, photo albums and keepsakes that chronicled my life's journey. Everything else I'd either donated, sold, or discarded, making room for the new furnishings that would be delivered to the condominium over the next few days. As the last box was carried out, I stood in the center of my empty apartment, memories echoing off the bare walls. I'd lived here for 9 years, not the longest I'd stayed anywhere, but long enough to consider it home. Now it felt like a shell, a chrysalis I was leaving behind. Ma'am? The moving supervisor appeared in the doorway. We're all loaded up, Ready when you are. I nodded, taking one last look around. Yes, I'm ready. The drive to Riverside Towers took less than 20 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another world entirely. The luxury building rose against the skyline, its glass facade reflecting, puffy white clouds drifting across the blue spring sky. The uniformed doorman greeted me by name, and the concierge emerged from behind his marble desk to shake my hand. Welcome to Riverside Towers, Ms. Walsh. We're delighted to have you joining our community. The movers had already begun unloading, directed by the building's staff with quiet efficiency. I rode the private elevator to the 18th floor, my heart beating a little faster as the doors opened directly into the foyer of my new home. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the empty space glow with possibility. I walked to the massive windows, gazing out at the panoramic view of the river and city skyline. Mine. All mine. For a moment, guilt tried to creep in. Was it wrong to enjoy such luxury when my son and his wife would never know I had the means to help them? But I quickly banished the thought. This wasn't about denying them. It was about finally embracing what was right for me after a lifetime of sacrifice and service. The movers worked steadily throughout the day, placing furniture according to my instructions. By late afternoon, my personal possessions were arranged in their new home, though they looked somewhat dwarfed by the spacious rooms. The new furniture I'd selected would be delivered over the next few days, gradually filling the space and transforming it from a show home to my home. After the movers left, I poured myself a glass of champagne from a bottle Vanessa had thoughtfully left as a housewarming gift and walked out onto the balcony. The spring evening was mild, the city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. Below, people hurried along the riverfront walkway, heading home from work or out for dinner. I raised my glass in a silent toast. To new beginnings. To freedom. To Eleanor Walsh. My phone buzzed with a text from Martha. All set for Europe? Got my tickets today. So excited you're joining. I smiled, typing back. All set. Moving into my new place today. Can't wait. Just as I pressed send, an incoming call flashed on my screen, a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I might have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello? Is this Eleanor Walsh? Former head nurse at Westlake Medical Center? Yes, it is. This is Dr. Gabriel Chen from Memorial Hospital. I understand you're currently between positions. I frowned, confused. That's right. May I ask how you got my number? One of your former colleagues, Dr. Sarah Williams, recommended you highly. We have an opening for a director of nursing that I think would be perfect for your experience level. Would you be interested in discussing it? I nearly laughed at the timing. Just as Lawrence Bennett was threatening to make sure I never worked in healthcare again, a new opportunity was presenting itself. That's very flattering, Dr. Chen, but I'm actually planning to take some time off before considering my next professional move. I understand completely, he replied, sounding disappointed. But would you at least consider having coffee with me to discuss the position? No pressure, just information. Memorial is implementing some innovative patient care models that I think would align with your philosophy. I hesitated. I didn't need the job financially, but the position sounded intriguing, and there was something deeply satisfying about the thought of securing a prestigious position despite Lawrence Bennett's threats. I could do coffee next week, I offered. Excellent. How about Wednesday at 10? There's a cafe near the hospital called Bean Trust. That works for me. After we hung up, I returned to the balcony, sipping my champagne and reflecting on this unexpected development. I didn't have to take the job. I could still go to Europe with Martha, still take time to rediscover who I was beyond my career and motherhood. But it was comforting to know that doors were opening rather than closing, despite the Bennett's best efforts. My first night in the condominium was surreal. The unfamiliar space, the city lights glimmering through windows with no curtains yet, the echo of my footsteps on hardwood floors. I slept in my familiar bed, though everything around it was new, a strange juxtaposition of past and present that felt symbolic of my life at that moment. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through the east-facing windows of my bedroom. For a moment, I was disoriented. Then reality rushed back. This was my new home, my new life. After coffee on my balcony, watching the morning bustle along the riverfront below, I decided to explore my new neighborhood. The concierge provided a neighborhood guide and recommendations for local shops and restaurants. As I strolled along the riverfront promenade, a familiar figure caught my eye. Robert, the gentleman from the park bench. He was seated at an outdoor cafe, reading a newspaper. "Robert?" I approached hesitantly. He looked up, recognition lighting his face. "Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise. I just moved into Riverside Towers," I explained, gesturing toward the gleaming building nearby. "Did you now?" His eyes twinkled. "Quite a step up from what you described before." "It's a big change," I admitted. "Would you join me for coffee?" "I'd love to tell you about it." Over the next hour, I found myself sharing the full story with Robert, not just the condensed version I'd given at the park, but everything from Martin Reynolds' inheritance to the confrontations with the Bennetts, to my upcoming European trip. There was something about Robert that invited confidence, his kind eyes and thoughtful responses making me feel heard in a way I hadn't experienced in years. "So you see," I concluded, "I'm at a crossroads. I have this job offer that sounds interesting, but I've also committed to this trip with Martha, and I'm still processing everything that's happened with James and the Bennetts." Robert folded his newspaper thoughtfully. "May I ask a personal question, Eleanor?" I nodded. "In all your planning, the new home, the trip, even considering this job, what would make you happiest? Not what makes practical sense, not what others would approve of, but what would bring you joy?" I considered his question seriously. I think I want to discover who I am outside of work and motherhood. I've defined myself by serving others for so long that I'm not sure I know who Eleanor is anymore. "Then that's your answer," he said simply. "Take the trip. Give yourself space to breathe and rediscover yourself. The job will still be there when you return, or another one will be. You have that luxury now." He was right, I realized. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to make decisions based on financial necessity or familial obligation. I could choose based solely on what brought me fulfillment. "What about you, Robert?" I asked impulsively. "What's your story?" A shadow passed over his face. "Oh, mine's not nearly as interesting as yours. Retired widower, spending my days reading newspapers and offering unsolicited advice to strangers in parks." There was something in his tone that suggested deeper waters, but I didn't press. We all had our stories, our private pains. "Well, I'm grateful for your unsolicited advice," I told him sincerely. "It helped more than you know." We parted with a tentative plan to meet again before my European trip, and I continued my exploration of the neighborhood with a lighter heart. Over the next several days, my condominium transformed as new furniture was delivered and arranged. The decorator I'd hired worked wonders, creating spaces that felt both elegant and comfortable, a reflection of who I was becoming rather than who I'd been. I decided to take Robert's advice and commit fully to my European adventure with Martha. When I met with Dr. Chen for coffee, I was honest about my plans. "I'm flattered by your interest, Dr. Chen, but I'll be traveling for at least 2 months. If the position is still open when I return, I'd be happy to discuss it further." To my surprise, he was understanding. "The timing isn't ideal, but frankly, you're exactly what we're looking for. I might be able to hold the position if you're seriously interested." We left it as a possibility to revisit after my return, and I walked away feeling strangely empowered. I'd prioritized my own needs without guilt or apology, something the old Eleanor would never have done. As my departure date approached, I continued settling into my new home and preparing for my journey. I explored my neighborhood, discovering favorite cafes, bookshops, and walking paths. I joined a yoga class at the building's fitness center and attended a wine tasting in the community room, gradually meeting my neighbors, mostly professionals, empty nesters, and retirees, all friendly but respectful of privacy in the way that only luxury building residents can be. Throughout this time, I received no further communication from James or the Bennetts. My calls and texts went unanswered, and the silence, while painful, reinforced my conviction that I'd made the necessary choice. They had drawn their line in the sand, and I had held my ground. 2 days before my departure for Europe, I was returning from a final shopping trip when the concierge called me over. "Ms. Walsh, you had a visitor earlier. She didn't want to leave. Her name, but she asked me to give you this." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a sonogram image and a handwritten note. "It's a girl, due August 15th. My heart constricted painfully. My granddaughter. James and Alicia were having a daughter. The image blurred as tears filled my eyes. "Are you all right, Ms. Walsh?" the concierge asked, concerned. "Yes," I managed, tucking the envelope into my purse. "Thank you." Upstairs in my condominium, I sat on the sofa, staring at the sonogram. A tiny profile, a curved spine, the suggestion of tiny hands. My granddaughter. A life coming into the world that I might never be allowed to know. I picked up my phone, hesitating only briefly before dialing James's number. As expected, it went straight to voicemail. "James, it's Mom. Thank you, or Alicia, for sending the sonogram. She's beautiful. My voice caught. "I want you to know that I love you, and I'll love my granddaughter, regardless of what's happening between us. I'm leaving for Europe in 2 days, but I'll be back well before the baby comes. My door will always be open to you, both of you, all of you. I hope someday you'll walk through it." I ended the call, knowing he would probably delete the message without listening. But I had to try. I wasn't shutting the door, even if they had. That evening, I met Robert for dinner at a riverside restaurant. He listened sympathetically as I shared the latest development. "It's a peace offering of sorts," he suggested. "Sharing the news, the image, it shows they're not completely closing the door. Or it's a final twist of the knife," I countered, reminding me of what I'll miss by standing my ground. Robert considered this. "Perhaps it's both. Families are complicated. Love and manipulation often intertwine in ways that are hard to untangle." "What would you do?" I asked. He sipped his wine thoughtfully. "I'd do exactly what you did. Leave the door open, then live your life with joy and purpose. Children, even adult ones, eventually respond to authenticity. They may not like your choices, but they'll respect your integrity if you remain true to yourself." "You sound like you speak from experience." A shadow crossed his face again, that same fleeting darkness I'd noticed before. "Let's just say I understand complicated family dynamics." We moved on to lighter topics. My upcoming trip, his recommendations, for museums in Paris and restaurants in Rome. By the time we parted, my spirits had lifted somewhat, though the ache of the sonogram still lingered. The day before my departure, I was organizing my travel documents when the doorbell rang. My heartbeat quickened. Could it be James? Had my message gotten through? I rushed to the door and peered through the peephole, only to see Diana Bennett, standing in my hallway, her expression grim. I hesitated, then opened the door. Diana. She took in my luxury condominium with visible shock, her gaze traveling from the soaring ceilings to the designer furniture to the panoramic view beyond the quay. Windows. "May I come in?" she asked stiffly. I stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She moved into the living room, her disbelief growing more apparent with each step. "This is where you live now?" she finally asked. "Yes," I replied simply. "I see. She turned to face me. Perhaps I underestimated you, Eleanor. Perhaps, I agreed, not offering more. Alicia sent the sonogram, she said after an uncomfortable pause. Not James. He doesn't know. Thank you for telling me. Diana perched on the edge of my sofa, much as she had in my old apartment, though this time it wasn't disdain for the furniture, but visible discomfort with the situation. I came because… She hesitated, seeming to struggle with her words. Because I know what it's like to be shut out from a grandchild's life. My own mother was excluded from Alicia's early years due to a disagreement with Lawrence. By the time they reconciled, critical years had been lost. This vulnerability from Diana was unexpected, and I found myself softening slightly. I appreciate you sharing that. I don't agree with your choices, she continued, her tone hardening again. I think you're being selfish and stubborn, but I also know my son-in-law can be inflexible, and Lawrence can be overbearing. Yes, he can, I agreed mildly. Diana glanced around the condominium again, reassessing. Clearly, you have resources we weren't aware of. More substantial than any of us imagined. Yes. Lawrence spoke to some of his colleagues at Westlake about you. They mentioned a patient from years ago, Martin Reynolds. Is that where all this came from? I tensed, surprised, that they had dug so deeply into my past. My financial situation is still private, Diana. She waved a dismissive hand. It doesn't matter. What matters is finding a path forward before the baby arrives. I've already told James my door is open, I said. I'll be back from Europe before the baby comes. Europe? Diana looked startled. You're going to Europe now? For 2 months with a friend. We leave tomorrow. She shook her head in disbelief. While your daughter-in-law is 7 months pregnant, you're off gallivanting around Europe? Alicia has excellent medical care, a supportive husband, and 2 involved parents, I pointed out. My presence isn't required, especially since I've been explicitly told I'm not welcome unless I meet certain conditions. Diana's jaw tightened. I see your mind is made up. It is. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I'll tell Alicia you received the sonogram. Whether she tells James is her decision. Thank you for coming, Diana. Despite our differences, I do appreciate the gesture. At the door, she turned back. One last thing, Eleanor. Whatever happens between you and James, between you and Alicia, that baby girl is innocent. She deserves to know her grandmother. On that, we completely agree, I said quietly. After Diana left, I sat by the windows, watching the river flow beneath the spring sunshine. The visit had been unexpected, revealing a side of Diana I hadn't seen before. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps a glimmer of understanding beneath the polished exterior. It changed nothing about my plans or my resolve, but it offered a thin thread of hope that perhaps eventually bridges could be rebuilt. Not on their terms, I wouldn't surrender my autonomy or my resources, but perhaps on new terms that honored everyone's dignity and independence. That evening, I finished packing for Europe, carefully selecting clothes for various climates and occasions. Martha and I would start in London, then make our way through Paris, Barcelona, Rome, and finally Greece, where we'd spend 2 weeks on a small island before returning home. 2 months of exploration, discovery, and freedom. 2 months to rediscover. Eleanor Walsh beyond nurse, beyond mother, beyond any role or expectation that had defined me until now. As I packed my passport and travel documents into my handbag, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. I checked it warily, half expecting another manipulation attempt from the Bennetts. Instead, it was from an unknown number. Safe travels, Eleanor. The world awaits. Robert. I smiled, my heart lifting. Tomorrow I would begin the next chapter of my life, a chapter written entirely by my own hand, on my own terms. That night, I slept soundly in my new home, lulled by the distant sounds of the city and the gentle knowledge that for the first time in decades, my life was truly my own. London greeted us with uncharacteristic sunshine, the city vibrant with spring energy. Martha proved to be the perfect travel companion, adventurous but organized, willing to explore but equally content to spend a quiet afternoon in a museum or cafe. Our days fell into a pleasant rhythm of sightseeing, sampling local cuisine, and long conversations over wine in the evenings. "I still can't believe we're actually doing this," Martha said one evening as we sat at a riverside pub, watching boats drift along the Thames. "When you called and said you wanted to join me after all, I nearly fell over." I smiled, sipping my cider. Life has a way of surprising us. Speaking of surprises, Martha leaned forward conspiratorially. "You never fully explained how you're affording all this. New luxury condo, first-class flights, shopping in London. Should I be suspicious about the source of your newfound wealth?" Her tone was teasing, but curiosity sparkled in her eyes. I hesitated, then decided Martha deserved the truth. We'd worked side by side for 20 years, sharing countless night shifts and difficult cases. If anyone had earned my trust, it was her. "Do you remember Martin Reynolds?" I asked. Martha's brow furrowed in thought. "The tech millionaire? Pancreatic cancer about 15 years ago?" I nodded. "He left me money in his will, a substantial amount." "Define substantial," Martha pressed, eyes widening. $2 million initially. It's grown since then." Martha choked on her wine. "2 mil? Eleanor, why on earth did you keep working all these years?" It was a question I'd asked myself many times. At first I didn't feel right using it. Then I got used to living simply. And I suppose I was waiting for something. The right moment, the right purpose. And that moment is now? "It seems so," I agreed. "After losing my job, after James's reaction." It felt like the universe was pushing me to finally embrace this gift. Martha shook her head in amazement. "Well, I'm glad you did. Though I'm still trying to process that I've been friends with a secret millionaire all these years." "Multi-millionaire, actually," I corrected with a small smile. "The investments did well." Martha's laughter rang out, drawing glances from nearby tables. "Eleanor Walsh, international woman of mystery. Who would have thought?" Her easy acceptance was refreshing after the Bennetts' greed and manipulation. Martha was happy for me, without calculation or resentment. It reminded me that genuine connections existed. People who could celebrate your good fortune without immediately seeking ways to benefit from it. As our European adventure continued, I found myself changing in subtle but profound ways. The constant weight of responsibility I'd carried for decades gradually lifted. I walked differently, spoke more confidently, laughed more freely. I bought clothes that expressed my personal style rather than merely being practical for work. I tried foods I'd never considered, visited places I'd only dreamed about, and engaged with strangers in conversations that expanded my worldview. I called Robert occasionally, sharing my experiences and insights. He seemed genuinely delighted by my adventures, offering suggestions for hidden gems in each city, and listening attentively to my stories. Our friendship, though new, had quickly become a source of comfort and understanding. Paris, Barcelona, Rome. Each city left its mark on me, each experience adding new dimensions to my self-understanding. By the time we reached Santorini, the small Greek island where we'd planned our longest stay, I hardly recognized the woman I'd been 2 months earlier, the one who'd stood in an empty apartment, terrified and heartbroken by her son's rejection. Our villa overlooked the caldera, the whitewashed walls and blue domes of the island creating a postcard-perfect backdrop for our daily explorations. Martha had arranged a cooking class with a local chef, and I discovered a passion for Mediterranean cuisine I never knew I had. "You're different," Martha observed one evening as we sat on our terrace, watching the legendary Santorini sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I've known you for 20 years, Eleanor, but I've never seen you like this. Like what? I asked, curious about her perception. Peaceful, confident. She swirled her wine thoughtfully. All those years at the hospital, you were competent, sure. Everyone respected your skills, but there was always this tension about you. Like you were carrying the weight of the world. Now it's gone. I considered her words. I suppose I was. Carrying weight, I mean. The responsibility of being a single mother, then the pressure of James's expectations and the Bennetts' judgment. I gazed out at the darkening sea. I've spent my whole life trying to measure up to others' standards, trying to be what everyone needed me to be. This is the first time I've just been me. Well, me looks good on you, Martha declared, raising her glass in a toast. To Eleanor 2.0, I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. To new beginnings. Our final week in Santorini passed in a blur of sun-drenched days and star-filled nights. I felt more alive, more present than I had in years, soaking in every moment with a newfound appreciation for life's beauty and possibilities. But as our return date approached, reality began creeping back into my consciousness. James, the Bennetts, my granddaughter, due to arrive in just over a month. The situation I'd left behind still awaited resolution. The night before our departure, I couldn't sleep. I slipped out onto the terrace. The Mediterranean spread before me like a blanket of liquid obsidian dotted with the reflected light of 1,000 stars. I pulled out my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, dialed James's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail, not immediately rejected, which felt like a small victory. James, it's Mom. I'm returning home tomorrow from Europe. I've been thinking about you, about Alicia, about the baby. I want you to know that I love you and I'm here whenever you're ready to talk. No pressure, no conditions. Just know that I'm here. I ended the call, unsure if he would even listen to the message, but feeling lighter for having reached out. Whatever happened next was up to him. The journey home was long, but uneventful. Martha and I parted at the airport with promises to meet for lunch soon, both of us returning to lives fundamentally changed by our experiences together. As the taxi approached Riverside Towers, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: the bittersweet ending of my European adventure, the comfort of returning to my new home, and the uncertainty of what awaited me in terms of family relationships. The concierge greeted me warmly. "Welcome back, Ms. Walsh. I hope your travels were enjoyable." "They were wonderful, thank you. You've had several deliveries while you were away," he informed me. "I've had them sent up to your unit." Curious, I thanked him and headed to the elevator. Inside my condominium, everything was just as I'd left it, but with a few additions. Several bouquets of flowers brightened the living room, accompanied by welcome home cards from both Martha and Robert. There was also a large package from an upscale baby boutique with a note from Dr. Chen at Memorial Hospital. "Hope your travels were rejuvenating. The position is still yours if you want it. Meanwhile, a small gift for your granddaughter." The gesture was unexpected and touching. I unwrapped the package to find an exquisite handmade quilt, embroidered with delicate flowers and birds. It was beautiful, the kind of heirloom gift that would be treasured for generations, if it ever reached my granddaughter. I pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on settling back into my home. I unpacked, started laundry, and ordered groceries for delivery, gradually reacclimatizing to regular life after 2 months of travel. That evening, I met Robert for dinner at our favorite Riverside restaurant. He looked well, his silver hair freshly trimmed, his eyes crinkling with genuine pleasure at seeing me again. "Europe clearly agrees with you," he observed as we were seated. "You're positively glowing." "It was transformative," I admitted. "I've never felt so free, so present in my own life. And now? How does it feel to be back? I considered the question. Bittersweet. I love traveling, but it's also good to come home to my new life here. Though the situation with James and the baby is still... I trailed off, unsure how to describe the complex emotions surrounding my estranged son and unborn granddaughter. Unresolved, Robert supplied gently. Yes, unresolved. Have you reached out to him since returning? I left a message last night from Santorini. No response yet. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Give it time. These situations rarely resolve overnight. We moved on to more pleasant topics. The places I'd visited, the foods I'd tried, the art I'd seen. Robert listened with genuine interest, sharing his own travel stories and observations. By the time dessert arrived, I felt fully present again. The cloud of family tension temporarily lifted by good company and conversation. As we walked back to Riverside Towers together, Robert lived just a few blocks away, I'd discovered. He hesitated, then said, I hope this isn't overstepping, but I've been thinking about your situation with James and the Bennetts. Oh? I prompted, curious. You mentioned that your wealth came from a patient you cared for, someone who had no family of his own. I nodded, wondering where he was going with this. Have you considered using some of that money to establish a foundation or scholarship? Something in Martin Reynolds' name, perhaps focused on healthcare for underserved communities or education for nursing students. The suggestion caught me off guard. I hadn't thought of that, no. It might serve multiple purposes, Robert continued carefully. Honoring the man who changed your life, doing meaningful good in the world, and perhaps showing your son that your reluctance to fund his lifestyle wasn't about selfishness or hoarding resources, but about principled choices regarding how the money should be used. I walked in silence for a moment, turning the idea over in my mind. It was actually brilliant. Martin had often spoken about wishing he'd done more philanthropic work during his lifetime. Using part of his gift to create positive change would honor his memory in a meaningful way. And Robert was right about James, too. The narrative the Bennetts had constructed cast me as selfish and withholding. A foundation dedicated to helping others would directly contradict that characterization. Robert, that's a wonderful idea, I said finally. I'll look into it. He smiled, clearly pleased. I know an excellent attorney who specializes in establishing charitable foundations, if you'd like an introduction. I would, thank you. At my building entrance, we paused. Well, welcome home, Eleanor, Robert said warmly. It's good to have you back. On impulse, I leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Thank you for everything, Robert. Your friendship has meant more to me than you know during this challenging time. A faint flush colored his face, and he seemed momentarily flustered. The pleasure has been entirely mine, he assured me before bidding me good night. Upstairs in my condominium, I sat, by the windows, looking out at the city lights and considering Robert's suggestion. A foundation in Martin's name felt right. A way to extend his legacy beyond the gift he'd given me personally. The next morning, I contacted the attorney Robert had recommended and scheduled a meeting to discuss establishing the Martin Reynolds Foundation for Healthcare Access. The idea energized me, providing a new sense of purpose and direction. 3 days after my return, Dr. Chen called to follow up about the director of nursing position at Memorial. I've been giving it serious thought, I told him. But I'm also exploring the possibility of establishing a healthcare foundation. I'm not sure I can commit to a full-time position right now. What if we discussed something part-time? He suggested. Immediately. Perhaps a consulting role, helping us implement the patient care models we discussed, with flexibility for your foundation work. His eagerness reminded me that I still had valuable skills and experience to offer, regardless of Westlake's decision to let me go. That could be interesting, I acknowledged. Let's set up a meeting to discuss details. Just as I was hanging up, my doorbell rang. My heart jumped. Could it be James? I rushed to the door and checked the peephole. It was Alicia. I hesitated, only a moment before opening the door. She stood in my hallway, heavily pregnant, her expression a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. She wore a flowing maternity dress that accentuated her rounded belly, and despite the tension between us, I couldn't help but think how beautiful she looked, glowing with impending motherhood. "Alicia," I said quietly, "would you like to come in?" She nodded stiffly, stepping past me into the condominium. Like her mother before her, she took in the luxurious space with visible surprise. "You've been away," she said. It wasn't a question. "Europe. I just got back a few days ago." She moved to the windows, gazing out at the view. "Mom said you got an inheritance from some patient. That's where all this came from." "Yes." She turned to face me, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "Why didn't you tell us? All these years pretending to be just a nurse living in that tiny apartment." The question held accusation, but also genuine bewilderment. I chose my words carefully. "I wasn't pretending, Alicia. I was a nurse. That was my identity, my calling. The inheritance was separate, something I never felt entitled to flaunt or spend carelessly." "But you're spending it now," she pointed. Out, gesturing around the condominium. "Yes, I am. After losing my job, after the way everyone reacted, I realized it was time to make different choices." Alicia was silent for a long moment. Then, "James doesn't know I'm here." I assumed as much. She moved to the sofa and sat down, clearly uncomfortable with her advanced pregnancy. I perched in a nearby chair, giving her space while remaining accessible. "He's still angry," she continued. "So are my parents. They feel betrayed. Because I wouldn't hand over my money on demand?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Alicia flushed. "It sounds terrible when you put it like that." "How would you put it?" She looked away. "We just thought, family helps family. That's what my parents always taught me." There's a difference between help and entitlement, Alicia. Between support and control. She was quiet again, her hand making small circles on her belly, perhaps responding to the baby's movements within. "Why did you come?" I asked finally. Alicia met my gaze directly. "Because she deserves to know her grandmother. Because despite everything, your family. And because," she hesitated, "because I think James misses you, even if he won't admit it." A flicker of hope kindled in my chest. "I miss him too. I miss both of you." "He's stubborn," she said, a hint of fondness in her tone. "Gets it from both sides of the family, apparently." I smiled slightly. "Apparently." Alicia shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "The baby shower is next Saturday, at my parents' house. James would probably have a fit if he knew I was inviting you, but I think you should be there." The invitation surprised me. "Are you sure?" She nodded. 3:00. Don't bring a gift. God knows we have everything already, between my mother's, shopping, and my registry. Just come. I'll be there, I promised. "Thank you, Alicia." As she stood to leave, she paused, looking at me uncertainly. "Can I ask you something? Something personal?" "Of course. If you had all this money, why did you keep working? Why did you live so simply?" It was the same question Martha had asked, but coming from Alicia, it carried different implications. I considered how to explain in a way she might understand. "The money never felt like it was truly mine," I said finally. "It was a gift, a responsibility. I wanted to use it wisely, meaningfully. And my work as a nurse wasn't just a job. It was who I was. I couldn't walk away from that identity just because I had financial security." Alicia's brow furrowed as if trying to comprehend a concept entirely foreign to her worldview. "But now you have walked away." "Not by choice," I reminded her gently. "And I'm exploring new ways to contribute. Consulting work, possibly a healthcare foundation." She nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure she truly understood. I should go. James will be wondering where I am. At the door, I asked, "Will you tell him you came to see me?" Alicia hesitated. "Not yet. Let's see how the baby shower goes first." After she left, I sat by the windows again, processing the unexpected visit. It was a small crack in the wall of estrangement, a tentative opening. Not reconciliation, not yet, but possibility. The baby shower. I marked it on my calendar, equal, parts nervous and hopeful about what it might bring. Would James be there? Would he speak to me? Would the Bennetts create a scene? There were too many variables to predict, but Alicia's invitation felt significant, a bridge being cautiously extended across the chasm between us. That evening, I met with Robert's attorney friend to begin the process of establishing the Martin Reynolds Foundation. As we discussed mission statements, board structures, and funding priorities, I felt a growing sense of purpose. This was how Martin's gift was meant to be used, not just to secure my personal comfort, but to extend compassion and care to others who needed it. Later, at home, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. In just a few months, my life had transformed completely, from the stability of a long-established career and the clear identity of nurse and mother to a fluid state of reinvention and possibility. I had lost things along the way: security, familiarity, and temporarily at least, my relationship with my son. But I had gained so much more: freedom, self-determination, new friendships, new purpose. And perhaps, if the baby shower went well, I might soon add a new role to my evolving identity: grandmother. As I gazed at the moon reflected in the river below, I felt strangely at peace. Whatever happened next, with James, with the Bennetts, with my granddaughter, I would face it as this new version of Eleanor Walsh, a woman who had finally learned to value herself as much as she valued others. The river flowed steadily onward, just as life did, carrying me toward a future I couldn't fully envision, but no longer feared. For the first time in decades, I was navigating by my own compass, charting a course that honored both my past and the possibilities that still lay ahead. And that, I realized, was the true gift Martin Reynolds had given me. Not the money itself, but the freedom it ultimately provided to discover who Eleanor Walsh really was, beyond the roles and expectations that had defined her for so long. I smiled up at the stars, whispering a silent thank you to the universe for the unexpected path that had led me here, to this moment of quiet joy and anticipation for what was yet to come. The day of the baby shower arrived with perfect summer weather, clear skies, gentle breeze, and flowering trees in full bloom. I spent the morning in anxious deliberation, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a silk dress in a soft teal that Martha had insisted I buy in Paris. It was more elegant than anything I would have chosen in my previous life, but it felt right for the new Eleanor. Despite Alicia's instructions not to bring a gift, I couldn't arrive empty-handed. After careful consideration, I'd selected a small silver music box that played Brahms' Lullaby. Inside, I'd placed a handwritten note. For my granddaughter, may your life be filled with beautiful music. With love, Grandma Eleanor. Simple, heartfelt, with no mention of past conflicts or present tensions. I also carried a second gift, though this one would remain in my purse unless the right moment presented itself. An envelope containing details of a college trust fund I had established for the baby. Not extravagant by Bennett standards, but meaningful, enough to cover 4 years at a good university. It represented my commitment to my granddaughter's future without surrendering to the demands that had been made of me earlier. As my car approached the Bennett's sprawling colonial home, my stomach tightened with apprehension. Cars lined the circular driveway and spilled onto the street. Clearly, this was a substantial gathering. Of course it would be. The Bennetts wouldn't miss an opportunity to host an elaborate event showcasing their daughter's impending motherhood. I took a steadying breath, smoothed my dress, and walked to the door. Before I could ring the bell, it swung open to reveal a server in a crisp white shirt holding a tray of champagne flutes. "Welcome to the Bennett residence," he intoned formally. "May I offer you a beverage?" I declined politely and stepped into the foyer, immediately engulfed by the buzz of conversation and laughter from dozens of well-dressed women gathered in the expansive living room. The space had been transformed with elaborate floral arrangements, balloon arches in soft pink and gold, and a lavish dessert table that looked like it belonged in a high-end magazine spread. Diana Bennett stood near the center of the room, gesturing animatedly as she spoke with a circle of equally well-coiffed women. Alicia sat in an ornate chair that had been decorated to resemble a throne, opening gifts while exclaiming with rehearsed delight over each one. Neither had noticed me yet. Hesitated in the doorway, suddenly feeling like an intruder. Perhaps this had been a mistake. Perhaps Alicia's invitation had been extended in a moment of hormonal empathy that she now regretted. Just as I was considering a quiet retreat, Miranda Bennett, the aunt who had threatened my career prospects, spotted me. Her eyes widened briefly before her social mask slipped back into place. She excused herself from her conversation group and made her way toward me with determined strides. "Eleanor," she greeted coolly, "this is unexpected." "Alicia invited me," I replied simply. Miranda's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched. "Did she? How interesting." Before I could respond, Diana glanced up and saw us. Her conversation halted. Mid-sentence, her face registering momentary shock before smoothing into a hostess's practiced smile. She whispered something to her companions and moved purposefully in our direction. "Eleanor," she said as she reached us, her tone carefully modulated. "What a surprise." "I invited her, Mom." Alicia's voice carried across the room. The buzz of conversation diminished as heads turned toward the unexpected drama unfolding. "She's family. She should be here." Diana's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, darling. We're delighted." She turned to address the room. "Ladies, for those who haven't met her, this is Eleanor Walsh, James's mother. Eleanor, please. Come in. Can I get you something to drink?" The awkwardness of the moment was palpable, but I smiled graciously. "Just water, thank you, Diana." As Diana disappeared to fetch my drink, a task she would normally have delegated to staff, but which now provided a convenient escape, Miranda leaned closer. "Just so you know," she murmured, "James isn't here right now. He's golfing with Lawrence and some colleagues. They're expected back later." The information was clearly meant to unsettle me, but I maintained my composure. "Thank you for letting me know." Miranda nodded stiffly and moved away, leaving me momentarily alone among the sea of strangers. I scanned the room, recognizing a few faces from previous Bennett gatherings, but no one I knew well enough to approach. "Eleanor!" Alicia called, waving me over. "Come sit by me." Grateful for the lifeline, I made my way through the crowded room to where Alicia sat, enthroned among piles of expensive baby gifts. She looked radiant in a blush-colored maternity dress, her advanced pregnancy giving her a luminous quality despite the obvious discomfort of her size. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said quietly as I sat in the chair beside her. "I said I would," I replied simply. She nodded, a faint smile playing at her lips. "James doesn't know. I thought it would be easier this way." "I understand." And I did. James's pride and anger still stood between us. This was Alicia's attempt at bridge building, fragile and tentative though it might be. "Is that for us?" She gestured to the small gift box in my hands. "It is." I handed it to her. Nothing extravagant, just something small for the baby. Diana returned with my water just as Alicia began unwrapping the music box. Her expression when she lifted the silver lid and heard the gentle melody was worth every moment of discomfort I'd experienced since arriving. "It's beautiful," she breathed, reading the enclosed note. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw genuine warmth there. "Thank you." Diana peered over her daughter's shoulder. "Lovely," she commented, though her tone suggested she found it underwhelming compared to the extravagant gifts surrounding Alicia. "How thoughtful." The baby shower continued with traditional games and more gift opening. Gradually, the other guests seemed to forget the oddity of my presence, or at least became too engrossed in the festivities to care. I remained by Alicia's side, helping her organize the mountain of gifts and making polite conversation with the women who approached. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself actually enjoying the gathering despite the initial awkwardness. Alicia showed a side of herself I hadn't seen before, less entitled, more genuinely excited about motherhood. She accepted the elaborate gifts with appropriate gratitude, but seemed especially touched by the handmade and sentimental items, including my music box, which she kept nearby throughout the event. "You seem different," she observed during a quiet moment while guests were busy at the dessert table. "More, I don't know, confident?" I smiled. "Europe was transformative." "It must have been." She hesitated, then added, "James checked your social media, you know. We saw the photos you posted from Paris, Santorini. This surprised me. I'd only recently begun using social media, encouraged by Martha during our travels to document our adventures." "He was checking up on me?" Alicia nodded. "He wouldn't admit it, but he was worried. And curious, I think. About this new life you're building." Before I could respond, the front door opened and male voices echoed from the foyer. The golfing party had returned. My heart rate accelerated as I recognized James's laugh among them. Alicia squeezed my hand briefly. "It'll be okay," she whispered, though whether she was reassuring me or herself wasn't entirely clear. The living room fell into an expectant hush as Lawrence Bennett entered, followed by several well-dressed men in golf attire, with James bringing up the rear. Lawrence spotted me immediately, his expression hardening. James, engaged in conversation with a companion, hadn't yet noticed me. Lawrence approached Diana and whispered something urgent in her ear. She shook her head slightly, gesturing toward Alicia. Lawrence's frown deepened, but he nodded curtly and moved to the bar set up in the corner, deliberately avoiding looking in my direction again. And then James saw me. He froze mid-sentence, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and finally, a tightly controlled neutrality. He excused himself from his companion and made his way slowly across the room, stopping at Alicia's chair. "What's going on?" he asked quietly, though the tension in his voice carried in the now silent room. "I invited your mother," Alicia replied, steadily. "She's family, James. Our daughter's grandmother." James's jaw tightened. He glanced at me briefly, then back to his wife. "We should talk. Privately." "No," Alicia said firmly, surprising both of us. "I'm 8 months pregnant, surrounded by mountains of gifts, and hosting 30 guests. We are not having a private conversation right now. You can be civil to your mother for one afternoon." A murmur rippled through the watching crowd. This was clearly not the docile Alicia they were accustomed to seeing. James looked taken aback, then slightly chagrined. "Fine," he conceded. He turned to me, his expression still guarded. "Hello, Mom." "Hello, James," I replied softly. "You're looking well." An awkward silence fell between us, thick with unspoken words and unresolved tension. Alicia glanced between us, then cleared her throat. "James, your mother brought the most beautiful music box for the baby. Look." She held up the silver box, opening it so the gentle melody filled the space between us. James examined it, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "It's nice," he admitted. "Thank you." It was a small opening, but I seized it gratefully. I thought she might enjoy it as she grows up, I still have the music box my grandmother gave me when I was little. James nodded, seemingly at a loss for what to say next. Lawrence appeared at his side, a glass of scotch in his hand. "James, Peterson is asking about the Miller account," he said pointedly, clearly providing an escape from the uncomfortable situation. James hesitated, looking between his father-in-law and his wife. "Go," Alicia told him. "We can talk later." With a last uncertain glance at me, James allowed Lawrence to steer him away toward a group of men by the fireplace. I released a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "That went better than I expected," Alicia commented dryly. "Did it?" I couldn't help but smile at her unexpected humor. He didn't storm out or make a scene. In the Bennett family, that counts as a resounding success. The baby shower continued, the initial awkwardness gradually dissipating as guests returned to their conversations and refreshments. James remained with the men at the other side of the room, occasionally glancing in our direction but making no move to approach again. As the event began winding down, guests started departing with air kisses and promises to visit after the baby arrived. I helped Alicia organize her gifts, making a list of who had given what so she could send thank you notes later. "You don't have to do that," she protested, as I recorded another monogrammed baby blanket on the list. "I don't mind," I assured her. "Besides, it gives me an excuse to stay a little longer." She understood my meaning immediately. "You want to talk to James?" "If he's willing." Alicia nodded thoughtfully. "Stay for dinner. It'll just be family. My parents, James and me. And you, if you'll join us." The invitation was unexpected, but welcome. "I'd like that, thank you." As the last guest departed, Diana approached us, her social smile replaced by a more genuine expression of exhaustion. "Well, that was certainly eventful," she said, sinking into a chair beside Alicia. "How are you feeling, darling? Not too tired?" "I'm fine, Mom," Alicia assured her. "Actually, I've invited Eleanor to stay for dinner." Diana's surprise was evident, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "Of course, I'll tell the caterers to set another place." Once Diana had left to make the arrangements, Alicia turned to me. "Fair warning. Dinner might be uncomfortable. My father isn't thrilled about your presence and James is still processing." "I can handle uncomfortable," I told her. After decades in nursing, awkward family dynamics seem relatively tame. She laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "I'm beginning to see why James always said you were the strongest person he knew, before all this happened." Her words warmed me unexpectedly. "Did he say that?" "All the time," she confirmed. "He used to tell stories about how you worked double shifts but never missed his school events, how you taught yourself car repair from library books because you couldn't afford a mechanic, how you helped him through college applications even, though you never went to university yourself." I blinked back sudden tears. "I didn't realize he noticed those things." "He noticed," Alicia said quietly. "He admired you enormously. That's why this whole situation has been so hard for him. He feels betrayed not just by a mother, but by his hero." Her insight surprised me. I never thought of it that way. "Men are complicated," she sighed, rubbing her belly absently. "Especially proud ones." Dinner was set up in the Bennetts' formal dining room, the table elaborately arranged with fine china, crystal, and fresh flowers despite the supposedly casual family meal. Lawrence sat at the head of the table, Diana at the foot, with James and Alicia on one side and me alone on the other, a physical manifestation of the divide between us. Conversation was strained at first, limited to safe topics like the weather and the baby shower gifts. Lawrence steadfastly avoided addressing me directly, speaking instead to James or passed me to Diana. James remained mostly silent, responding when spoken to, but volunteering nothing. Halfway through the main course, Diana made an obvious attempt to ease the tension. "Eleanor," Alicia tells me you're considering establishing some sort of foundation? I nodded, grateful for the opening. Yes, the Martin Reynolds Foundation for Healthcare Access. It's still in the planning stages, but the focus will be on providing medical care to underserved communities and educational opportunities for nursing students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Martin Reynolds, Lawrence repeated, finally acknowledging my existence. The tech millionaire who left you his fortune. Yes, I confirmed simply. And why would he do that? The question held an edge of suspicion. I met his gaze steadily. Because I was his nurse during the final months of his life. Because when everyone else had abandoned him, I was there. Because I read to him, listened to his stories, treated him with dignity when his body was failing him. And what else? Lawrence pressed, his implication clear. Nothing else, I replied coolly. Martin was a lonely man dying of pancreatic cancer. I was his nurse, then his friend. That's all. James looked up sharply. Dad, that's enough. The use of Dad rather than Lawrence, and the protective tone, surprised everyone at the table, including James himself, judging by his expression. Lawrence raised his hands in mock surrender. Just asking what we're all thinking. Actually, Alicia interjected, we weren't all thinking that. Some of us were thinking it's admirable that Eleanor is using her inheritance to help others rather than just herself. Diana cleared her throat. Uncomfortably. The foundation does sound worthwhile, Eleanor. Will you be running it yourself? I'll be on the board, I explained. But we're hiring an experienced executive director to manage day-to-day operations. I've also accepted a part-time consulting position at Memorial Hospital, helping implement some new patient care models. Memorial? James spoke up for the first time. Dr. Chen's hospital? I nodded, surprised he knew the connection. Yes, he offered me a position shortly after I lost my job at Westlake. He always said Westlake was foolish to let you go, James commented, then immediately looked as if he regretted the admission. You've spoken to Dr. Chen about me? I asked, unable to hide my surprise. James studied his plate. He called me for a reference when you were being considered for the director of nursing position. You never mentioned that, Alicia said clearly. As surprised as I was, James shrugged uncomfortably. It didn't seem relevant. What did you tell him? I asked quietly. The truth, James replied, finally meeting my gaze. That you were the most dedicated, competent nurse I've ever known. That Westlake made a massive mistake. That any hospital would be lucky to have you. The admission hung in the air between us, a small but significant bridge across the chasm of hurt and misunderstanding. Thank you, I said simply. The remainder of dinner passed in a marginally more relaxed atmosphere. Lawrence remained cool but civil. Diana made increasingly comfortable conversation, and James, while still reserved, at least acknowledged my presence with occasional glances and brief responses. As dessert was being served, Alicia suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Oh, James was instantly alert. What's wrong? Is it the baby? She's just very active tonight, Alicia assured him, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. Feel. The tender moment between them, his face lighting up as he felt his daughter move, brought tears to my eyes. Whatever our difficulties, whatever bridges still needed repair, this child would be loved. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, I found myself momentarily alone with James while the others were occupied with seating arrangements. You look well, Mom, he said awkwardly. Europe must have agreed with you. It did, I confirmed. It gave me perspective I needed. He nodded, hands in his pockets, clearly unsure what to say next. I decided to take a risk. James, I know things are still difficult between us, but I want you to know that I love you, and I'll love your daughter. My door is always open to both of you, whenever you're ready. He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, I saw your condo. When you were in Europe. This revelation startled me. You did? I went there to, I don't know. Talk? Maybe. Argue? Probably. He gave a self-deprecating shrug. The concierge said you were traveling but showed me up when I said I was your son. I hope that was okay. Of course, I assured him, touched that he had sought me out, even if his intentions hadn't been entirely peaceful. It's a beautiful place, he continued. I can see why you chose it. Thank you. Another silence fell between us, less tense than before, but still weighted with unspoken words. I'm still angry, he admitted finally. Not about the money itself, anymore, but about the secrets. I thought we told each other everything. I know, I said softly. I should have trusted you more, but I was afraid. Afraid the money would change how people saw me. Afraid it would create expectations I couldn't fulfill. And as time passed, it became harder to explain why I'd kept it secret for so long. James nodded slowly, processing this. I said things I shouldn't have, things I didn't really mean. So did I acknowledged. We were both hurting. Before he could respond, Diana called us to join the others. The moment passed, but something had shifted between us. Not reconciliation, not yet, but a tentative step in that direction. As the evening drew to a close, I prepared to leave, thanking Diana and Lawrence for their hospitality. Lawrence's response was perfunctory, but Diana surprised me with a genuine, "It was good to have you here, Eleanor." Alicia hugged me, an unexpected gesture that touched me deeply. Come back next week, she whispered. For lunch, just the two of us. I want to show you the nursery. James walked me to my car, the night air cool against our skin after the warmth of the house. We stood awkwardly beside my vehicle, both reluctant to end the evening despite the lingering tension. Drive, safely, he said finally. I will. I hesitated, then added, Thank you for today, James. For not asking me to leave. For giving this a chance. He looked away, hands in his pockets again. Alicia said we were being ridiculous, that life's too short for family feuds. The baby made her philosophical, I guess. I smiled, recognizing the deflection for what it was, his way of acknowledging change without admitting vulnerability. Impending parenthood has a way of clarifying priorities. So I'm learning. He opened my car door, then paused. Maybe you could come see the nursery sometime. When it's finished. Give us your professional opinion. It was a small olive branch, offered tentatively. I accepted it with equal care. I'd like that very much. As I drove away from the Bennett estate, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead still held challenges, trust to rebuild, boundaries to establish, relationships to redefine. But for the first time since James had delivered his ultimatum in my old apartment, I believed reconciliation was possible. In my rearview mirror, I could see James still standing in the driveway, watching until my car turned the corner and disappeared from sight. Like me, he was caught between past hurts and future possibilities, between pride and love. But love, I had learned over these difficult months, was both stronger and more flexible than pride. Love could bend without breaking, could heal after wounding, could find new paths when old ones were blocked. My granddaughter would know her grandmother. My son would find his way back to me, in his own time and on new terms. And I would continue, becoming this new version of Eleanor Walsh, financially independent, professionally respected, personally fulfilled, who had finally learned that taking care of herself wasn't selfish but necessary. The night sky above was scattered with stars, each one a point of light in the darkness. Like those stars, moments of connection had illuminated this difficult day. James defending me to Lawrence, Alicia's unexpected warmth, the invitation to see the nursery. Small lights, perhaps, but bright enough to guide the way forward. I drove, Toward Riverside Towers, toward my home, toward the life I was building day by day. Behind me lay a bridge beginning to mend. Ahead lay possibilities I was only beginning to imagine. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The lunch with Alicia. The following week opened doors I thought had been permanently closed. Without the tension of James's presence or the Bennett clan's scrutiny, she revealed a different side of herself, more relaxed, even charming in her own way. "This is it," she said, leading me into the nursery, a symphony of soft pinks and creams, with hand-painted butterflies adorning one wall. James's friend from college did the mural. He's an artist in New York now. As I admired the beautiful space, I couldn't help comparing it to the simple nursery I'd created for James on a shoestring budget 3 decades ago. His second-hand crib, walls decorated with magazine cutouts, clothes primarily gifts from hospital. Colleagues. "It's beautiful," I told her sincerely. "She'll love growing up here." Alicia sank into the rocking chair by the window, her hand absently stroking her belly. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm ready for this. If I'll be a good mother." The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. "Every new mother feels that way," I assured her. "It's normal to be scared." "Were you? With James?" I nodded, memories flooding back. "Terrified. I was younger than you, with far fewer resources and no family support. I used to stand over his crib at night just watching him breathe, convinced I was going to make some terrible mistake." "But you didn't," Alicia pointed out. "James turned out well." Our conversation meandered through topics we'd never discussed before. Her childhood in the Bennett household, my experiences as a young single mother, our shared concerns about modern parenting. For the first time, I saw Alicia as a woman on the threshold of motherhood, with all the hopes and fears that entailed. As I prepared to leave, she hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to come to my next doctor's appointment? It's on Thursday. James will be there, but—" She trailed off, uncertain. "I'd love to," I assured her, touched by the invitation. Thursday arrived with late summer heat shimmering off the pavement. James was already in the waiting room when I arrived, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I approached, his expression guarded but not hostile. "Mom," he greeted, standing briefly. "Alicia's in the restroom. She'll be out in a minute." The appointment itself was magical, the sound of the baby's heartbeat filling the examination room, the ultrasound revealing her perfect profile, tiny hands and feet visible on the monitor. "Everything looks excellent," Dr. Mitchell assured Alicia. "She's developing right on schedule, good size, good position." James held Alicia's hand throughout the examination, his expression softening whenever the baby was mentioned. Despite the lingering awkwardness between us, I could see he was going to be a wonderful father, attentive, protective, fully present. After the appointment, we stood somewhat awkwardly in the parking lot, none of us quite ready to part ways. "Was thinking of grabbing lunch," I ventured finally. "Would you like to join me?" James and Alicia exchanged a quick glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Actually," James said slowly, "we were wondering if you might want to come back to the house. Nothing formal, just to talk." Their house was as immaculate as ever, but without the oppressive formality of that fateful dinner party where I'd announced my job loss. No in-laws, no expectations, just the 3 of us sitting in their comfortable living room with iced tea and the afternoon stretching before us. "So," James began after an awkward silence, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, about how we all reacted." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I was angry," he admitted, "hurt that you'd kept such a huge secret. But I've realized it wasn't really about the money. It was about feeling like I didn't know you as well as I thought I did." "I understand that," I said quietly. "And I'm sorry for not being more honest with you. I should have trusted you more." "Why didn't you?" he asked, the question simple but profound. I considered my answer carefully. At first, it was shock. I never expected Martin to leave me anything, let alone such a fortune. Then it was guilt. Who was I to receive this money when I'd done nothing exceptional to earn it? Just my job, caring for a dying man. James listened intently as I continued. As time passed, it became harder to explain why I'd kept it secret for so long, and I suppose I was afraid it would change how people saw me, how you saw me. You thought I'd see you differently if I knew you were wealthy? James sounded genuinely confused. Not just that, I tried to explain. I was afraid I'd become Eleanor with the money instead of just Eleanor. Nurse Eleanor. Mom. I'd seen how quickly perceptions shifted when people came into unexpected wealth. James was quiet for a moment. Like how we immediately expected you to fund the nursery and college accounts. I nodded, grateful for his insight. Exactly like that. But we're family, he pressed, though his tone held less accusation than before. Families support each other. Yes, they do, I agreed. But support should be freely given, not demanded as a right. When you and the Bennetts assumed immediate access to my resources, when you offered housing only in exchange for childcare, it felt like my value was being reduced to what I could provide financially. James had the grace to look uncomfortable. I didn't see it that way at the time. I know, I said gently. You were caught up in your own perspective, your own needs. We all were. Alicia, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. My parents have always emphasized financial support as the primary way to show love. Money equals caring in the Bennett household. She smiled ruefully. It's taken me a long time to realize that's not true for everyone. A silence fell between us. Not uncomfortable this time, but thoughtful. So where do we go from here? James asked finally. I think we start over, I suggested. Not trying to erase what happened, but learning from it. Building something new based on mutual respect and clearer boundaries. Boundaries, James repeated, as if testing the word. Like what? Like understanding that my financial decisions are mine to make, though I'm happy to help in ways that feel right to me. Like recognizing that being a grandmother doesn't automatically make me free childcare. James nodded slowly. And from my side? I smiled, appreciating his willingness to engage with the difficult conversation. From your side, perhaps boundaries around expectations. Not assuming I'll conform to the Bennett family's standards or values. Respecting my new life and choices, even when they don't align with what you might prefer. That seems fair, he acknowledged. Though I have to admit, I like your new life better than I expected to. The condo is amazing. You should see it now that the decorating is finished, I told him. Maybe you could both come for dinner sometime? I'd like that, Alicia said immediately. And you should meet Robert. James says he sounds intriguing. Robert, I repeated, surprised that James had registered my friendship with Robert. The concierge mentioned you often have dinner with a distinguished silver-haired gentleman, James explained, a hint of teasing in his voice. Said you seem quite fond of each other. I felt a flush creeping up my neck. Robert is just a friend. If you say so, Alicia remarked with a small smile. Though there's nothing wrong with it being more. You deserve companionship, Eleanor. The idea of James and Alicia speculating about my personal life was so unexpected that I couldn't help but laugh. Let's focus on rebuilding our relationship before you start playing matchmaker. James's expression grew serious again. I'd like that. Rebuilding, I mean. I've missed you, Mom. The simple admission so long hoped for brought tears to my eyes. I've missed you too, James. So much. I was stubborn, he acknowledged. Too proud to make the first move, even when I knew things had gone too far. We both were, I said. But that's behind us now. As if to punctuate our reconciliation, Alicia suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Oh, she's kicking like crazy. Here, feel. She guided my hand to the spot. Beneath my palm, I felt the rhythmic movement of my granddaughter, strong and insistent, as if announcing her presence in our conversation. The three of us shared a moment of wonder, connected by this new life that would soon join our complicated family. Have you decided on a name? I asked. We're considering a few, James replied. But we're leaning toward Eleanor Rose. I looked up in shock. Eleanor? Alicia nodded, watching my reaction carefully. It was James's idea, actually, to honor his mother. Tears welled in my eyes, spilling over before I could stop them. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, James assured me, his own voice thick with emotion. Just know that despite everything, you've always been my hero. Mom, the strongest, most dedicated person I've ever known. If our daughter grows up to have half your resilience and compassion, we'll consider ourselves successful parents. 3 weeks later, at precisely 2:17 in the morning, my phone rang. Jolting me from sleep, James's voice came through, breathless and excited. Mom, it's time. Alicia's water broke. We're heading to the hospital now. I was fully awake in an instant. I'll meet you there. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Nurses coming and going, Alicia's contractions intensifying, James alternating between calm support and barely concealed panic. I stayed nearby, offering quiet encouragement when needed, careful not to overstep. Shortly after noon, little Eleanor Rose Walsh entered the world, red-faced, indignant, and perfect in every way. Would you like to hold your granddaughter? The nurse asked. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging my throat. The tiny bundle was placed in my arms, her weight so slight yet so profound. I gazed down at her scrunched face, the delicate eyelashes, the miniature fingers curled into fists, and felt a love so powerful it nearly brought me to my knees. Hello, little one, I whispered. I'm your Grandma Eleanor. We've been waiting for you. James appeared at my side, his eyes wet with tears. She looks like you, Mom. Same determined chin. I laughed softly. Poor thing. No, he said seriously. It's perfect. I hope she has your strength too. 1 month later, on a perfect September evening, I stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the city's finest hotel, addressing the gathered crowd at the official launch of the Martin Reynolds Foundation for Healthcare Access. Martin believed that everyone deserves dignity in their healthcare journey, I concluded, looking out over the sea of faces, colleagues from the medical community, foundation board members, philanthropists, and in the front row, my family. James. And Alicia sat side by side, little Eleanor sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Beside them were Diana and Lawrence, their initial skepticism about the foundation gradually giving way to reluctant admiration. And next to them sat Robert, his proud smile warming me from across the room. Tonight marks not just the beginning of this foundation, but a continuation of Martin's legacy of compassion and care. Through our scholarship program for nursing students, our mobile clinics for underserved communities, and our patient advocacy initiatives, we honor Martin's memory by extending the same dignity and respect to others that he valued so deeply. Later that evening, as the event wound down, I found myself alone for a moment on the hotel's terrace, gazing out at the city lights. Robert joined me, slipping his arm around my waist. You were magnificent, he said softly. Martin would be proud. I hope so, I replied. It feels right, using his gift this way. And what about your gift? Robert asked. The one you've given yourself these past months? I considered his question, thinking about the journey that had brought me here, from head nurse to foundation, director, from taken-for-granted mother to respected matriarch, from lonely singleton to woman in love. That feels right too, I said finally. All of it. As if on cue, baby Eleanor's cry rose from inside the ballroom, followed by James's voice calling my name. "Grandma duty calls," I said with a smile. "Go," Robert encouraged. "I'll be right here when you're done." And that, I realized as I went to tend to my granddaughter, was the true gift I'd received when I lost my job and found my fortune. Not just financial independence or even reconciliation with my son, but the freedom to be fully myself, balancing family responsibilities with personal aspirations, loving others without losing myself in the process. Eleanor Walsh, once defined solely by what she gave to others, had finally learned to give to herself as well. And in that balance lay a kind of wealth that no inheritance could provide, the richest legacy I could possibly leave to the tiny namesake now reaching for me with perfect trust in her grandmother's waiting arms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.